Hey guys, Garrett here, and today I want to discuss whether you should buy a lot or land to put your new house on. If you're thinking of building a new house, you're going to have to buy one or the other. So how are you going to buy that dirt? And while a lot and raw land sound exactly the same, they aren't. They are very different. Let's discuss what's different about them. First, let's discuss raw land by itself. Now, the first thing you need to know is, well, obviously you're building a house, but how much land are you needing? And is that something that's readily available in lot form? And if it is, well, great, but there's probably going to be a premium associated with it. So if you're looking for raw land, you're probably looking for something that is bigger than what you need, but you might subdivide it down to get what you want and then sell off the rest of it. And if this sounds familiar, I made a video about it about a year ago of how I did it with my own home. If you want to check that out, there's a link down in the description. If you're wanting to buy a farm with lots of land, well, that's pretty easy to do. You can find farmland all over the place, and it's going to be zoned most likely correctly for your use. You can even put your own house out there and buildings and that sort of stuff. But for the majority of people that aren't doing farms, but they want a little bit more acreage, say like 5 to 10 acres, something like that, those types and sizes of lots just aren't available. Or if they are, it's very rare and they sell out very quickly. So let's say you bought raw land, say it's 40 acres, something like that, and you really only want 5 acres of it. Well, in my area, you can divide down to 20 acres without having to plat land. So if you're wanting a 5-acre lot, you're SOL. But if you're wanting a 20-acre lot, no problem at all. You can find those and you can sell them off in 20-acre increments. It's going to probably be different from state to state, county to county, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but you're going to have to figure out with wherever you live. So let's say you're looking at 40 acres. Again, you want 5 acres, so you know you're going to have to subdivide it down. But before you buy that, there's a lot to consider. First, do you have access to it? What fire district are you in? What school district are you in? Where are utilities? Do you have paved roads or gravel roads, and who maintains those? Is it zoned correctly for you to do what you want to do? What was on that land in the past? Was it oil wells? Was it nothing? In that case, it's great. But let's say it was oil wells or a manufacturing plant or an automotive place or a gas station or something like that. You could have contaminated soil or groundwater underneath you, and you're probably going to have to do some sort of a phase 1 environmental study. But before you pull that trigger, go ahead and talk to everyone that you can about that land. The landowner might not have had it for that terribly long, so see if you can find a neighbor that knows something about what's gone on in the past in this area, or if you can find someone with a ton of wisdom that's been there for decades and decades, they're going to know what was on that land. And if the answer is nothing, well, you're probably good. If not, if there was something, you're probably going to have to get that environmental phase 1 study done. And that does cost money. So you're going to want to get a hold of your engineering firm to be able to do that. And if they start finding things, then you're going to have to get into a phase 2 or a phase 3 to figure out exactly what the contamination is out there and what's it going to cost to get rid of it. Is it going to end up being a Superfund site? Trust me, stay away from anything that has any sort of contamination. Next, get on your local government's GIS. Most likely it's going to be online somewhere. So for me, I'm in Sedgwick County, Kansas, and if I go to sedgwickcounty.org, they have a departments heading. I just click on that, go down to GIS, and then I can browse all kinds of GIS information, which is a geographic information system. So I can click on different lots and see what the taxes are on it, or how big this lot is, or who owns this lot. I can also pull up to see if there's floodplain information out there, and generally speaking, the GIS is going to have that. So if you're buying something that is within the floodplain, especially if all of it is within the floodplain, the value goes dramatically down unless you fill that area to where it is out of the floodplain. So again, all of that is very expensive. It's stuff that you want to know before you ever buy that raw land. Let's assume the environmental is good. You are not in the floodplain. You don't really have any big challenges. Those are the two biggest challenges with raw land. And if you've passed those tests, it's time to move on and look at other things. Like I said, you want to see what utilities are out there or near. You want to see what school district you're in. You want to see the roadways that are there. You just want to know as much information about this land as possible. And if you are happy with that, it's time to buy that land. Next step is to plat that land, and I'm going to make an entire video on how to actually subdivide land and all of the steps necessary within it. But just know that there's a lot of expense that goes into it. There's a reason that developers make money and risk money. A lot of them actually lose a lot of money if the market turns, but it costs a lot of money. So raw land is always going to be the cheapest land out there. And then at that point, you have to do all your value adds. So you're going to survey it, you're going to plat it, you're going to get a drainage study done on it. Whatever utilities have to go out there, you're probably going to have to foot the bill to put those in. But the good news is, after all of this, after you put all of that money in, and yes, it takes a lot of money to do, you get to sell lots. And so that leads us into the actual lots themselves. Should you buy a lot where everything has already been done for you, but you are paying a premium for it, or the raw land of which you have to put a ton of work into and quite a bit of money into, but you could inevitably sell off all the other lots that you did not want, keep the one that you wanted, and not only get your lot for free, but probably make money on the way. If you're looking at buying a lot in a subdivision that is already either established or it's brand new, the good news is basically everything that I just talked about is already taken care of. But remember, you're paying a lot more per acre for that lot than if you would have bought that raw land. So if you bought a lot, the utilities are probably already in place. But hold on a second. Places like mine here in Kansas, we have a thing called specials. And a lot of developers will take advantage of this because local governments will pay basically for the infrastructure that goes into making that new development. So it could be the dirt work, the sanitary sewers, the water lines, the storm sewers, the roads, everything that goes into it. They will pay for it and then specially assess it back to those lot owners over a 15 to 20 year period of time. So if you are buying a lot, you need to know that up front. Are you buying a lot that has specials, or are you buying a lot where there are no specials? All of that has already been paid for by the developer, and it is built into the price of that lot. Because while a lot can seem really cheap, let's say it's a quarter acre and you're getting it for $20,000. Sounds like a great deal, but then you've got $30,000 worth of specials that you have to pay off over the next 20 years. Well, it doesn't sound like such a great deal at that point, but it's a very common way that things are done. It just artificially sets that lot price kind of low. When you're looking at lots, also look at the covenants. So with raw land, there's probably no covenants out there, but most likely with any sort of subdivision, there is going to be restrictive covenants, and it's going to be very well laid out as to what you can and cannot do on that lot. And if you're fine with that, the lot may be the way to go. But if you absolutely do not want to follow or have someone dictate to you, an HOA coming at you, telling you what you can and cannot do, having to pick out the colors and all of that kind of stuff of your house and the stone and the landscaping, you may want to do the raw land because you get to choose that and you get to write your own covenants for your subdivision. As I discussed earlier, big lot subdivisions are pretty darn rare, and therefore you're going to probably get most subdivisions are going to be a quarter acre to maybe a half acre if you're lucky. We've got a few around here that go from basically a half acre to 2 acres, and those are great lots. But none around me really go to that 5 acre mark, and that is so sought after. And of course, the reason that most developers are not doing big lots is because, if they already have to put the infrastructure in for, if it's roads, sewer, water, all that kind of stuff, it makes the lots more valuable if you shrink the lots. So you get better bang for the buck as a developer if you make your lots smaller. Now, if you make them a lot bigger, you have to divide that exact same cost over fewer lots. That increases the per lot cost on the developer's expenses, and therefore they have to build that into their sales price. And if the sales price of that lot cannot cover all of those expenses plus the acquisition cost and everything that went into it, well, then it doesn't make economic sense. If you are going to buy an existing or a new lot, a lot of times if you are buying that lot and having the home built immediately, you can wrap the two of those expenses together. You don't have to get a loan for the land and then a loan for the build. You can do both in one, and it's a lot more common. Most of the banks will let you do that, especially if it's a construction loan. But if you're looking at buying raw land, you have fewer folks that are willing to lend on that land. And that land generally has to be at least 20 acres before they will lend on that. And a lot of times they're not going to give you extra money to be able to do that development. So if you're going to develop your own land, you need to have cash on hand, even if you borrow just to buy the land. You have to pay for a lot of things that have to be paid in cash. So that plat, survey, all of that stuff, that's cash. The utilities associated with it, a lot of times that's going to be cash unless you are doing it in a way that you can specially assess those utilities. But a lot of times to qualify for those special assessments, to have a city be able to do that, you have to have basically in escrow a certain amount of money set aside, or the land, or something that you put as collateral to cover those special assessments, because those specials can cost, over a big development, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the city isn't stupid. They want to make sure that somehow that is going to be covered. So they put regulations together just to be able to qualify for as a developer to do those special assessments. And you have to have those assets set aside necessary to cover that requirement. The more I hear myself talk about this, the more I kind of feel like I'm pushing people to say, go ahead and just buy a lot. It is honestly the easiest thing to do is just to buy a lot that is already there. But if you are someone that likes to take on these types of challenges, as I am, and you have the assets necessary to be able to do this, you have the time necessary and the willpower to get past all the regulations that can happen along the way. Especially if, say, you're in New England, getting past the regulatory stuff is going to be long and arduous, and therefore if it's going to take you a couple years just to get past all the regulations, and you've bought your land with debt, you're going to have to pay down that debt the whole time that you can't do anything with that land that you have. So just remember that. In the Midwest, this process usually goes a lot faster, and it's generally cheaper to do. But you're going to have to know the economics of your area. And are the market conditions right for your subdivision to actually be needed? Are you going to actually make money on this and be able to sell those lots? Because the more cash, the more money, the more debt that you put into this, and then you can't sell those lots, you're going to get underwater fast. So I'm going to say, if you're new to development, take a small piece of land. I wouldn't say more than 40 acres. Don't make a huge subdivision, and make sure that you have the cash necessary to be able to do this, as well as the time. Can you afford to sit on those lots while they are empty before anyone has bought them? Being a developer can be super lucrative, but it can also bankrupt you in a hurry if you do it incorrectly, if you use too much debt, if you get the market just absolutely wrong. It can sink you. So be realistic about the costs associated with it, as well as the time. And again, if you're really just looking to build a house on some land, you could always buy that 40 acres, put your house on it, and then wait until the market is right and then subdivide it. You don't necessarily have to sell all that off immediately. So should you choose a lot over land? Well, that's up to you guys. I can't make that decision for you, but I've laid out a lot of the things to think about before you make that decision. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to hit that like button down below, as well as subscribe. I'll see you next time.